Good morning. I said good morning. Thank you. I wasn't awake. I needed that to help me. We're here to talk about retention, attention. If that's not what you want to talk about, you're in the wrong flight. True. Today is Tuesday, April 19th. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we're here to talk about attention, retention. I'm Tom Rudebock from Ohio. I'm your moderator. I should be sitting between these two guys, but nevertheless, our panelist today is, to my far right, Dana Schirmer, our executive director. He's been calling since preconception. He has some things to present. I know he has some people out there that he wants to draw on and pull on that has some good ideas. To my immediate right is Mr. Bill Boyd, the editor of American Square Dance magazine, who is a relatively new caller and has a lot of good ideas. He's a professional speaker. He did our keynote speech at the convention last year, and he has a lot of good ideas. After everybody's done talking, if there's any time left, I'll share what I have, but I do have a handout that if we don't have time, that I will be glad to share with you. I'm going to start with Mr. Boyd. You do the short straw whether you knew it or not.
Unaccustomed as I to public speaking. My name is Bill Boyd. And I also have a handout here. And it starts off, before we start on dancer retention, we probably should take and listen to what a few professional journalists had to say. And they say one of the most important things, and I think in terms of business, by the way, I've been in the printing business, it seems like Gutenberg invented the press, and successfully have run that business over the years. I've watched print shops open and close, and somehow I'm still in business, so I'm doing something right. And one of these things that I believe in is communication. And that's something that somewhere we lack along the line. And communication is important for keeping our existing clients or our existing dancers. Do we communicate with our dancers as we go along? And it's an excellent way to meet people when you go out. You have to communicate with people to invite them into square dancing. And I did this handout on two different items. Before we can keep dancers, we have to get dancers and we have to get them into the class. And once we get them in the class, we have to keep them in the class, and if they're excited in the class, they're going to stay and dance for a while with us. I'm also a Rotarian, and we had a discussion about Rotary retention. And someone said in our Rotary clubs, Rotary International, over the last few years, our membership has stayed approximately the same, even though we lose several thousand Rotarians a year. Well, in Florida, we have a lot of clubs that keep the same number of dancers every year. They add a few, and they lose a few. You're going to lose 10% of your dancers every year, just like everybody loses 10% of their business customers every year because they move away, they pass away, or they become dissatisfied for some reason or do something else. Square dancing, we have the additional problem because if we lose a spouse or a dance partner, many times the other partner doesn't come back. And I always say a lot of that has to do with communication. We're going back right there again because that person all of a sudden doesn't feel welcome. They lost their spouse or partner, and now all of a sudden they come back as a solo dancer and they don't feel welcome and they're not welcomed. So in class, again, I'm going to cite from personal experience here, if I may, and things that I've observed. Now, my wife and I have been dancing for over 30 years. I've been calling for 7. I'm the new caller on the block. I'm the new kid in this panel. But watching and angeling dances over the year, personal experience. I started calling, and I believe in enthusiastic calling. You know, everybody jokes with me because I don't smile in my pictures. Well, when I'm on stage calling, I'm smiling, I'm enthusiastic, I'm energetic. The club that hired me to call, the very first club that hired me to call, virtually everybody there is in their 70s and plus, with one exception now. I've got two 12-year-olds that dance as well. Kind of excited about that. But these people come in, and I decided to go all out. I'm going to advertise, and I'm going to make this club grow. So I went out and invested a great deal of money. I did a direct mail piece to everybody in the city of Ocoee, printed it. I happen to know a printer, so I got a good break on that. Mailed out a real nice, colorful, trifold brochure. I had, and by the way, I charged the first night. I had around 22 people the very first night of that class. They walked in, they paid their money, and they walked in. Every one of them, for my opening night, said they had a great time. I met them when they walked in the front door. I greeted them on break. They were having a ball. Everybody at the club said, I've never seen such smiling enthusiasm in my life. The people didn't come back. But the next week, I had 18 more people there that were different and had the exact same results. I ended up with 3 students. I had to sit and try to analyze why. If these people were having a good time, they wouldn't. And one of the things that comes to mind is when I get ready, the dancers that come in, the actual square dancers, never greeted or talked to the people. They sat off aloof on the side. They showed no enthusiasm. When I got ready to start the square dance, because the dance, it's the club dance, I'm the club caller. I just did this out of the goodness of my heart. I'm sitting there, all right, let's get a square on the floor and let's show them what we can do. Let's everybody get up and let's everybody dance out on your feet. Can I get somebody up, please? Can I get at least one couple on the floor? Both nights that I had the open house and had these people come in, they paid money, and when they sat there, they watched people in costume with no enthusiasm for the activity. I watched people that wouldn't get up and dance, and I had to practically beg to get a square on the floor with enough people sitting there for 2.5 to 3 squares, and they didn't want to get up and show off what they could do for these other people. Well, if we don't show enthusiasm for what we got, why is somebody going to come and join us? The other side of that spectrum, and this caller's passed away, so I'm not going to name him, he could never get a class going in Florida. He would always advertise, and he'd go out and he'd tell his few club members to go out and get dancers to come in. They'd come in. They'd bring in. This is one of the days when we had more dancers coming in. These people would come in to dance, and the caller would say, I already showed you how to square throw. I'm not going to have to show that again. See him actually get to a point where he was going to pick up and throw a chair at somebody because they weren't doing a call right. For some reason, he could never keep a class going. Can't imagine why. Middle spectrum. And this took place recently at a club that's always been successful. They lost their caller. The caller was Danny Robinson. He passed away a few years back. They had another caller since then, and he was old and he had cancer when they hired him, and he passed away, and they have another caller now. And they stayed stagnant for about a year. They were successful but stagnant. On their mainstream night, they danced 10 or 11 squares. On a plus night, they danced 8 or 9 squares. And 2 young people decided, we're going to re-enthusiase the club. We're going to make it enthusiastic and go. Now, the club caller they have now is enthusiastic. His name's Whit Brown. He happens to be a friend of mine. But he's an enthusiastic caller, and he, for as much energy as he's got, because he's like a lot of us, we're in the 70s. That's age, not year. These kids went out. They're in their 40s. They went on Facebook. They advertised. They got people up, and they energized the dancers in the club. They brought in 26 dancers for class. Guess what? They kept 26 dancers for class. Every time he dropped a needle, by the way, a lot of this is in here in writing. Every time he dropped a needle to start something, switched on the computer. Okay, we don't drop needles anymore. Some of us do. Every time he put the music on, the angels from there, and he had 20-plus angels, would look for these other people enthusiastically, get them up and say, let's dance, let's party. You have an enthusiastic caller, you have enthusiastic dancers. Guess what? When the class comes in, they stay. Whether it's just an open house or whether we go through. Now, that's to keep the dancers in class. If you excite the dancers in class, guess what? They stay in your club. Now, we can add to that problem from there because his particular club, in order to join the club, and this was club rules, not his, you had to be a couple. They don't let singles join. So Whit, for the entire time he's talking from about 5 weeks on, says, what I want you to do, even if you don't join the club, come and dance. We'll find you a partner. And he works on doing that. I made on the back of this a little checklist. And should I do my checklist before I pass this on? I'm just running off at the mouth here. Now, a lot of this is common sense, but I see it. I've seen callers that when they leave their chip done, they run outside to smoke or they don't talk with anybody. They don't do anything. So I put this down. Number 1, and this is in writing. It says here, is your club location accessible and easily found? Do you put signs up outside on the street pointing toward your square dance? You can buy these road signs, you stick them up and say square dance, point an arrow. It makes it easier for places to find. Do you list and advertise the program of your dance either on a website or do you have a mailing list? Does your dance start and end on time? Does your club have a planned program for each evening of dance? Does every member wear a name badge? Are all guests and members greeted warmly at the door, not only by the caller, but by the other club members as well? At least 1 or 2 of them to greet them when they come in. And I honestly think that's very important. Do you maintain a friendly atmosphere throughout the entire evening? Do your dancers make visitors feel welcome? And do you encourage them to join in the squares? Are your announcements short and to the point, and do they interfere with your dance time? Now, over the years, I've got to add a comment to that. I've been to a dance where the actual talk, and they're saying, okay, we danced 2 tips, now we're going to talk for 35 minutes before we go back to dancing. And then you wonder why people leave. As a caller, do you have a plan or a program for the evening? And is it flexible? Can you make changes if you have to show up? Can you answer the telephone in the middle of a program?
That's entertainment.
Let me entertain you.
I have to tell you, that barking sound, that means it's my wife.
You better take that. You better take that call. Do you introduce the guests by names sometime during the evening or during announcements? Do you contact the dancers or students who've missed the dance? Do you call them up and say, why weren't you there? We really missed you. It was important for us to have you there, and I feel bad that you weren't there. Is something wrong? Is there something we can do to help you? Do you encourage your club to go on raids to other clubs? And the second part of that is, do you encourage your dancers to visit other clubs and say, let me join with you and go to that other club with you? It doesn't have to be a raid. Just go visit another club with them. It's amazing. Is your club tied to any international or national websites? They're free. You can go to almost any one of these national websites and say, hey, we've got a club in Florida, New York, Chicago. Could you put us up there? You know, if you talk nice to Vic Cedar, he's got a pretty nice website too. And my major question is, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Do you want your dancers to come in? You know, if you have more dancers on the floor, it could be more work. You might have to work harder to plan, program, and do your other things. Another reason we lose dancers, and this isn't listed on that part of it, it's another place, is the cliques and things that form in the club, and I don't know how to answer that question. Because I've seen that at churches, I've seen that at civic organizations, I've seen it organizations where you should never see that. And they still happen. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Dana, you should have answered the phone. Guess who just walked in? I'm going to pass the microphone back to Tom. I don't think Dana wants to talk to anybody. Do I have any questions on what I've done? And that's all of that, by the way, is not. Yes, sir.
Dan, Claremont, California. What's a raid?
A raid is something that's set up. The question was, what is a raid? And a raid is set up where your club will take at least one square of dancers and visit another club and steal that club's banner and then bring that back to your own, which also requires them to form a raid to come back to your club to get the banner back. Okay. Dan said he called it something. What did you call it? I'm just curious. They call it a visitation. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Any more questions or thoughts for Bill? All right, we're going to pass it on down to Dana Schirmer. He's got his personal business taken care of.
Got the phone off. First of all, it's a pleasure to be sitting up here with Tom and Bill and talking on this. This is not an easy subject, and there's not a lot of real answers out there. Everyone has their own views and so forth, but I kind of go back and think about retention in three different phases. First of all, the retention of getting a person in the door and keeping them in lessons. The second thing, the term graduation. I hate to use the word graduation. Because graduation means what? We're done. They'll never come back. We're done. We like to use the word celebration or something like that, or initiation or something, get them to understand this is not the end, this is the beginning. So I don't like the term graduation. I steer away from it if at all possible. So that's the first stage is getting them in the door, taking lessons. Second one is once they've completed the lessons, where do they go from here? How do we keep them? And the third, how do we retain the dancers who've been dancing for 20, 30 years? How do we keep their interest in them? So there's three stages to keep worrying about. I guess, how many people on here joined square dancing so they could learn how to do a spin the top? You didn't know what spin the top was. You joined square dancing for another reason. And I think that reason was sociability, something to do with other people, something to do as a couple or friends or something of that nature. And we tend to do our best to forget that. We tend to do our best to teach them how to do complicated calls, how to do all the calls backwards and forward, and we forget that what they really wanted was to come here and have fun and socialize. So we need to put more emphasis in that regard in my mind. I love angels, but angels can also be very harmful to the activity. And I say that because they want to be helpful, but sometimes they tell people too much. They show people too much. And I think we really need to sit down as a group before lessons every year and say, let's have a dinner with our angels. We want to have you come to lessons. If you're planning to come to lessons, please come and have dinner with us. And then go through the points of things you really don't want them to do or say. Because the first thing they do is come in and somebody says, well, we're happy to have you here. And somebody will say, well, how many lessons is this going to take? Oh, it's going to take you 20, 30 lessons. And then you go to plus, and that's going to take another 20 lessons. And all of a sudden, we don't want to do that. Now, granted, a few years back in the 80s and so forth, people didn't make any connection to that. 20 lessons wasn't anything. Nowadays, everybody wants immediate gratification. They want things now. And when you say 20, they're not going to do it. I always use as an example, my grandson stayed with us for a while, and he wanted to take Taekwondo lessons. So my wife signed up in a course with him. 5 weeks. And it was like $7 or $8 a person each night. No big deal. 5 weeks, no problem. Got done with that. Oh, by the way, if you want the next step, it's another 5 weeks. Well, okay, we'll take another 5. Ended up they took 25 lessons of Taekwondo. Now, if they had told them the first night they was going to take 25 lessons, they'd never signed up. But they did it in increments. I'd like to know if we could get a way to do that. That would be great. If we could figure out ways to tell people lessons are only 5 lessons, rather than saying it's going to be 20 or 25 lessons or more. I think that will help us maintain and retain people. And I'm not sure what that answer is yet, but I still, in my mind, feel there's a way of doing that, breaking it down. So again, I think our angels need to just be educated on what they should be doing. And that's not waiting until the first night of lesson saying, oh, well, you can't say that. You can't do that. No, tell them beforehand, before the people walk in the door. That's what you would like them to do and what you'd like them to say. And get their attention before the new dancers comes in. I have one lady, bless her heart, she comes to a lot of our lessons, and she wants to greet everybody at the door. And how do square dancers greet everybody? A big old hug. That's fine for a certain age bracket. I can tell you young kids don't want to be hugged by an older lady. As nice as she is and everything, they're scared to death when they walk in that door anyway, and then have somebody run up there they don't know and give them a big hug. I've had to talk to her about it because, again, we could just see the people almost wanting to turn around and run out the door. You have to realize that a new person walking the door does not want to be that immediately socialized. They want a little bit more time to adjust to the surrounding and get to know people a little bit more. I mean, if you walked out the door now and ran up to the first person you saw that's not a square dancer and give them a hug, what do you think they would say to you? You know, it would not be pleasant. So I think you just have to let your angels know what's expected. I like the first night. I like to intermingle line dancing, music of any kind during the whole dance, if at all possible. But the first couple of nights, I want socializing to be really emphasized. So I do a lot of mixers, not round dancing, but line dancing, a lot of circle dances, Sicilian circles, things like that, trying to get people mingling with one another. And then during the breaks, when I see people, as Bill said, the parents will go one area and the class people go over here, I kind of start pulling people up here and say, let's do this. And trying to bring them from one side to the other side, maybe show something or just simply get people talking. Or find out, well, this guy does this, and I talked to this guy, he does this. Let's get them together and let them talk together. Smaller the dance, if you have a small class, you want a small area to dance in. You don't want to have a big hall and have a square that disperse all over the place. You want them to bring them together. And that may mean bringing a bunch of chairs around to an area in the center of the dance hall, but get them where they're actually mingling and actually wanting to stay and talk to one another. I have one gentleman just graduated, I should say graduated, just finished lessons with us. And he's been a really a nice guy to have in the activity. The other night we finalized a group, and he brought homemade ice cream. We stayed afterwards. Everybody sat down and had homemade ice cream. Talk about everybody mixing and talking. It just brought everybody together that evening. They were laughing because we got done with lessons. They were having a good time. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, he brought in homemade ice cream and just made the whole night special for everybody. So you have to find the right people and let them know what you're wanting and expecting of them. The people, once you've finished lessons, you just cannot say, oh, you're done. And, oh, by the way, the club dance is on Saturday night and we want you there. It doesn't always work that way. They have to have some connection to that club, whether it be from the angels or some way of encouraging them to come. It's just not, oh, here's the card and we expect you to come to the club dances. No, it's got to keep that blend going where they're doing lessons, having fun, feeling comfortable with one another, and just gradually bring them into the club a little bit, maybe a couple of nights before the lesson is done or a few weeks before the lesson is done. Invite them to come to club dances. It doesn't have to, the clubs can back down their dance level a little bit on a given night and not feel like they've lost out on their own club dances. And you can bring the students in a little bit earlier and still feel like they're having fun, and maybe start understanding the club dance isn't all that much different for me. I can do it. So it's got to become a gradual build in my mind. The third step, as I said, what do we do with the people that have been dancing 20, 30 years? They want more challenge. They want. I don't really know if it's really that, or they just want more fun, and they're not getting it. So they're okay. I need more unusualness. I think if we just realize and change our routines once in a while, that the more experienced dancers will want to stay. I think if they just do things, we get so caught up, well, we always do our square dance this way. Why not bring back a little bit of humor into the dance? Maybe bring back a little bit of mixers and just unusual things that we used to do. A lot of clubs used to do, changing partners, dance cards, whatever, just so people can actually be a little bit different each night they come and make it more fun. But the after dance activities have to also expand. And I think Dan Claremont's here. He's the president of a very large club in California, right, Dan? And he was telling us some of the things their club does that is outside the square dance world. And that brings in some of the sociability that these people are looking for. They stick that square dancing to keep them together, but they use outside activities to kind of do something a little bit different. Dan, you want to say a few words?
Dan Claremont. I'm a president of the Ramblin' Rogue Square Dance Club in California. Right now we're currently 178 members, and we grow every year. Second largest club in California. And one of the things, and Dana had asked me to be part of this panel, and thank you, but I declined because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. This is my first convention. So, but one of the things that successfully works for the Rogues is from day one, when a class member comes, we make sure that they're aware that we have a lot of social events. We have 12 to 15 social events a year outside of square dancing, non-square dancing things. And I gave Dana a whole list of things that we've done over the last few years. And these are things from taking a train ride down to San Diego, going on the USS Midway visitations, to museums, having wine tasting parties in the wine countries, taking out yacht excursions through the harbor, Newport Beach Harbor. I mean, going up to the mountains and being in cabins. I mean, we've done so many things, including little things like potlucks. But what's great is that as soon as a class member begins on their first night, whatever social event is that month, they have to be invited. Absolutely, the class members have to become part of the club from day one. Doesn't mean they'll come, but they have to be invited. And they all are personally invited, either by the social chairperson or their committee or the president, whoever happens to be in charge of that particular social function that's coming up. And since our classes are September through June, we usually have a function at least one a month, sometimes two a month. And so we know we got the Angel Game coming up in September, so it's day one they start. You're coming to the Angel Game tailgate party. And we make sure that we have our tailgate party where we dance, and the caller who's ever calling there, usually it's me, will just do the basics, start through ladies chain, etc. The things that they've only learned in the first 2 or 3 weeks. And they're out there dancing in the parking lot of Angel Stadium. So, this is the second, third week there, and they're just like, well, who are these people? These people are weird, But as soon as October comes around, we have our big Halloween dress-up party, and we have our gathering with the potluck and all the extra food and the apple and pumpkin pies. And they're just like, this is like a big family. And they've already gotten accustomed to it. December comes around, we have this huge non-square dancing formal party, or we call it a holiday party. And it's amazing. We have people that have been members of the club for years that don't even dance anymore, that they only attend that particular function. And we'll have, this last year we had 160 people out of the 178 members at that particular function. And that included every class member. And it was amazing. And we have a DJ that comes in and does dancing and line dancing and ballroom dancing and whatever. And we have a theme. And it's amazing to me that so many clubs I'll go to and they'll say, how come you guys are so successful? And the first thing I'll tell them is, or ask them is, how many social functions do you have outside of square dancing? And I'll wait for the answer. Most of the time, it's not very many. We have a holiday party. Well, what do you do January, February, March, April, May, June, July? And they can't answer that question. But so for us, and our club is very successful in this, is because it's our social functions, because that's where the people that want to retain and stay in, that have been dancing for 30 and 40 years, they want to be part of that part of it. What that does is even though we only have maybe 15 or 20 class members, we still have 12 squares every Thursday night at our class. Because they want to come and hang out with each other. And these are people that have danced forever. They don't have to come. And over 3/4 of our club dance in this A1, A2, C-level dance. But they still come to basic beginners classes. And the main reason is they want to hang out with each other. They want to be with each other. And it's so fun. Even though we have 12 squares of people there, you'll see 3 squares sitting over here talking. And they're planning another social event. Or they're talking about what they're going to be doing next month. But they're there. And they're helpful. And when I need them, they get right up and we put them to work. So my emphasis on people, if they were talking about retention, not only for the old-timers, but to get involved, the new dancers, is you have to have things outside of square dancing that involve a lot of food, actually. Come to think of it, everything we do has food involved. Except when we go we even went to the theater. We had food in the park before we went to the theater. So it's kind of funny how that works. Square dancers like to eat, I guess. But I just wanted to emphasize that because we do have a very successful club, and we have a very successful formula for it. And we're one of the few clubs in Orange County, California, that it's working. And people keep saying, how do you do it? How do you do it? And the only thing it comes down to is you have to have these social events that are outside. And if you don't have, and it's a lot of work, but we put a committee together with a social chairman, and that committee usually consists of about 20 people. That's a big committee. And that committee then says, this person does the angel game, this person does the holiday party, this person does... So you're not have one person planning 12 or 15 social events. So anyway, that's kind of what we do, and it's something that I'd like to share because it's exciting to know that we have a very fast-growing club. And we have a very young club. The average age in our club is probably 41 to 45, which is very young in square dancing. And we have a lot of associate members who are under 18. So, is that okay?
While he was talking, we're comparing notes here. On my cheat sheet I have says, meet outside your dance venues, picnic parties, pool outings, etc. His says, I can't find that line again. L. Party nights, theme nights, music and refreshments, party nights outside square dancing. Isn't it amazing how we all know what we're supposed to do, and so very few of us do? And before I pass this over, the first year I started calling for the club, and that's what got me into calling, is they begged me to come and call for them because their caller quit. And that's a whole story behind that. The caller quit, and he said, I asked him why he quit, and nobody would go call for him. They said the reason he quit was, I've been calling for that club for over 3 years, and they just can't dance. I drew a line from that in my mind, and I said, okay, because for some reason a year after we started, they could dance. And that was my first year of calling. Admittedly, I brought some background experience into it from my years in square dancing, and angeling classes over the years. I started talking from the first week. The first week after I started a class, I started talking about where the class and club would meet when we went to state convention. I didn't say, if you go to state convention. I said, when we meet at state convention, where are we going to get together for dinner and our after parties? When we get to state convention. That was the first time that club had sent anyone to state convention in 7 years, because they didn't want to go anywhere. But it's amazing how much influence the caller can have if you keep saying, let's do this, and we just keep trying to influencing them and saying, when we get together here, when we go to this club, to go on a raid or visitations, you go, would you like to meet for dinner first, or would we just like to show up at the club? Not are we going to go, but when we go, would you like to? And it's amazing what happens because people will start doing it. Sorry.
All right. Any outside questions? Dana, you're going to read the mic runner.
Lee Ashwell from Oregon. I'd like to congratulate Dan for calling them class members. I have a real hang-up with one term, and like your graduation, beginners. The day they walk into that room to take that lesson, they're a new dancer, in my opinion, not a beginner. That was a real stigma with me when I went through class. And I've tried to change it. I've spent 32 years trying to change it in Oregon. It's impossible. They are new dancers. And when you talk about the graduate dancers over here and the new dancers over here, our most successful club in Portland, Les Seeley, when he starts his lessons, when they take their break, the chairs are in a circle. There's no way for them to divide them up. They're all in one circle.
Brian Freed from Bloomington, Minnesota. And Dana, for you, since Dan sent you an email, could you post, the body of the email, like on the members site, with the other convention stuff, and so we could download it? Thank you.
Beth McLaughlin, Australia. I think I've just walked out of a recent club meeting because this is exactly what we have been discussing at home. So it's not just restricted to here in the States. We have the same problem in Australia. And one of the words that came up in our meeting was the word clique. I went and had a look in the dictionary. And a clique is a gathering of people with the same interest. So I think we need to look at a different word for where we have people who within our club who are gathered for the same interest, who then gather within themselves again. Because we are a clique in ourselves. We are gathering for the one interest, and that's square dancing. But when you get your dancers to your clubs and then they gather again in their own little interest, why are they doing that? Is it because that's who they came to dance or learn with? Is it their friends that they came and things like that? We've tried to organise social functions. It's just the same little group of people who keep coming to the social functions. So we're just trying to find out how to get people to interact after the square dancing. We have supper at the end of each night. 3/4 of them will go and pick up their bag and walk out the door. They won't stay and mix and have their free tea and coffee and food, which we all know square dancers enjoy, but they won't even do that. So I don't know how we get over these problems, but when someone finds the answer, please let us know.
One more thing. Dan Claremont, Mission Viejo, California. One thing you hit on was convincing people to go to the state convention. California just had their state convention last weekend in San Diego, and there was almost 1,300 people there, and 102 of those were Ramblin' Rogues. So that's basically 1/12 of the people that were there were my club. 16 of those people were our class members, and it was amazing. And we just had a great time. And everywhere you went on Saturday night, we were all in our club outfit, including the class members, because they had our club outfit. We even though they're not members yet, we still let them have the material. And it was amazing. People were like, you knew that you were with the Ramblin' Rogues. And am I right, Tammy? You were there. So, yeah, it was fun.
I want to add one other thing that just came across my mind, and I don't know how many people do this, but the club that does it seems to be doing well. They're a fairly new club, about 3 or 4 years old, and they're running one of the largest clubs in Kansas now. They when they have people come to the club the first night or to the lessons first night, they say, okay, lessons are free. However, free for members only. So we'd like you to join the club tonight, and you'll get your lessons free. So the people may pay their club dues, $30, $40, $50, whatever it may be. They get their lessons free and a badge and everything, but they're already a part of the club. So when you get done with lessons, they're automatically in the club. They feel like they have to go on, because they're in the club now. It might be another ideal for some people to kind of break that barrier between lessons and the transition to club dancing by having their badge, by being the fact they're on the club roster, I'm already a member. An ideal.
I'm Dave Geale. I'm from Cheyenne. We agree with Dana's output as far as graduation. We don't graduate either. We promote. And so it's a promotion into the club. When we ask people to come to lessons, we've tried, as everyone else, as far as trying to get new people in. We tried flyers, and we tried to put something in the newspaper and that sort of thing. The best way to get them is from the members themselves. And if the members themselves will bring new people in, whether it be a friend or an enemy or whoever it is we hope that they'll stay with us. One of the other things, too, that we've also accomplished is we have a list of things for the angels, and we try to give them to the angels. We invite them to come out and help with lessons. And so we give them this letter, or not letter, but a form, as saying this is what our responsibilities as angels are. We ask that you stay with us within these limits. Please don't try to teach. That's what we have a caller for. And so that's what happens as far as that is concerned. Thanks very much.
I'm Larry Morris from Washington. I'd like to have you consider another thought here. One of the things that seems to be happening at meetings whenever we talk about dancer retention is we start talking about the social things that we need to do. And it seems like we keep hearing that over and over, and we keep hearing that, oh, by the way, we're not really doing them. And so I'd like to have you entertain another thought, and that is that many of us dancers, and I'm a dancer, not a caller, many of us dancers are asocial people. We're not in it for the social. I'm in square dancing because I don't have to know what weight my foot needs, what foot my weight needs to be on, and I only have to listen to the caller. I don't have to talk to anybody else. And when the dance is breaking, I basically sit by myself. I don't care to talk to anybody else. And I've noticed that about half of the people in the clubs and dances that I go to are not terribly different from that. They'll sit with their spouse, they'll sit by themselves, but they basically don't interact with each other. And so when you say, let's put the chairs in a circle, let's make sure everybody's invited to our monthly event, these are all well and good, but what you need to be aware of is that there are some people that don't want that or that are very uncomfortable in those situations. And so if you're trying to make people welcome, you need to meet people where they are and not necessarily force them into some particular mold or another. Thank you.
Oh, but excuse me. We've had some good ideas, some good thoughts. Bill just asked me if I was going to talk. I said after everybody else got done. And I'm only going to hit on things that haven't been touched upon that I've got in my notes. And in reality, many of these things overlap. And I find it interesting that so many of us have so many of the same thoughts. I'm like several of you. I don't know how to get our local clubs to adopt them. What is it? There's a definition of stupidity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Insanity. Well, it's stupidity too. But nevertheless, and I kind of broke my things down a little bit like Dana and I. We'd had some email conversation. But a couple things that were mentioned, hugs, yellow rocks. A year ago, one of the classes I teach for, and I teach for three different clubs, they had a handout was given to the angels and said, please, no hugs, no yellow rocks for the first several weeks. I had one gentleman come up and said, when did CALLERLAB come up with that law or requirement? And it actually was one of our more shy dancers that said it. But, he knows I'm active with CALLERLAB, and, of course, being the teacher, and that was fine. But we passed out this angel requirement, and it was put together by the club officers. Yes, I had some input, but it was mostly their thoughts, and which I think is good. But backtracking a little bit, and these are just some thoughts I had, and I find it rather interesting that many of us have some of the same thoughts. But greeting the dancers. But one of the things that one of the clubs did is when they were leaving, the gentleman and his wife that coordinated the classes one particular year, as they were leaving, and this we researched, borrowed, was as they were leaving, they were given a little token, business card size thing or some other thing, and it had a little saying on it with a little piece of candy or some quote. And one night they passed out a little card that comes to mind with these little boxer raisins. On it, it says, "We're raising the roof having fun." And another one had a big hand, is, "Give me a high five, we've reached 5." Or we reached 25. And he come and asked me, he says, "Where are we at on the call list?" And we'd reached, at that point, 25 calls. But they did this for 6-8 weeks going into the class. After that, yes, they stopped them because, number one, I think they were running out of ideas. But number two, we got the important part was we got those new dancers and let them know they were appreciated the first several weeks. As we all talk, we all like to eat. One of the clubs has all three of them have some refreshments during the breaks between tips. But one club, for whatever reason, and it's all gratis, no planning, but the spread of food they have on lesson night is amazing. And people enjoy just chatting and talking and having a cookie or two. I do. For the CD, we're listening to the voice section next door, and somebody sounds like they're screaming, but they're practicing their scales. Nevertheless, I do everything I can to make each class night, lesson night, and I don't like the word students, new dancers, make it seem like a dance. Yes, we're learning as we go, but I want to make it as much as possible, make it seem like a dance. Let's keep the evening light. We all have enough stress during our day. Develop mentorships. I've seen this work in some places where a couple will mentor another couple. Maybe just take them under their wing. Maybe not be with them all the time, but it's somebody they can go to and talk to. Sociability, we've talked about that. Mix, mingle, include them in any and after dance activities. Ask them occasionally to help with coffee, setting up the refreshments if you have that. Don't make it an every week job, but that makes them feel a part of the group. One of the clubs that I've seen and they do this is that gather as much information on the new dancers as possible. Anniversaries, children, what are their hobbies, what are their activities, and somebody will watch and if they've done something outside of the square dance activity, recognize them that night. Maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's an anniversary, maybe they got a job promotion, anything of that nature. We've not talked about theme nights, music refreshments, and it don't have to be elaborate. Talk to your caller or cuer ahead of time. And of course, we're talking about class night, but some night just ask the caller, we want a theme around this. I have a tendency to do that anyhow, but nevertheless, talk about it. Occasional party nights at your new dancer sessions. Slow, struggling dancers. Split the couple, but only with their permission. I've seen this help, and in one of the classes I'm teaching, we had a couple that was struggling. They split them up about half the night with their permission, and then they come back together and dance as a couple, usually the last tip or two, and I've seen it help a lot. Early bird sessions for slow or struggling any new dancer, any dancers, period. Do not let squares become overloaded with new dancers. Avoid all angel squares. And this is one of my pet peeves. You'll see these people get up and square up. The angels will sit back waiting, and they've told me, we're waiting, we want to make sure we get all the new dancers up. But they'll sit back, and then after we get the squares filled up, they'll get up in the back and form their own square. I have no problem with that if it's 3/4. That's not a good ratio. 6 men and 2 ladies, or vice versa. And that, as long as we get our squares filled. But I had one club president tell me, the reason we don't dance as much at lessons is because it's boring. Now, this is our club president, or their club president. I'm a contract person with them. Watch for shy dancers. This contradicts what the gentleman in the back said, but draw them in, make them feel a part of the group. Club members should attend as much as possible, especially the officers. And I think one of the things we need to look at as a club member, if I was a new dancer, is this the type of environment that would draw me back? Would I come back here? Believe it or not, square dancing is not for everyone. Sad to say, but as much as we'd like to think that, square dancing is not for everyone. And I think we need to thank the angels for their support if they support us like we want them to. Moving on in the class transition, experienced dancers need to be accepting. Just hitting on some things that maybe we haven't talked about. Callers should call to the floor, not down to them. They're still testing their wings. Let the dancers succeed, but don't dumb down the choreography. Again, if I was a new dancer, is this the type of environment that would draw me back? In our club environment, it's interesting, again, we've all talked about many of the same things. Non-dance activities, which was mentioned. I'm not going to go into what I've got listed, but it was I've got that list actually as number 1, but it was not a priority exactly when I was listening to things. Personally ask the dancers to help, but not for every dances. Again, your coffee, your punch, whatever. Many hands make light work. The sociability part of it. Recognize guests, dance with them. Dance with a caller's cueer's partner. People see this. There are lots of clubs. My wife won't go. She sits all night. I've told some of the club members that, we thought she had people to dance with. Travel nights, we've talked about. Visitation. After parties. And you don't want to do it every club dance, but why not have an after party where you do skits and stunts, humor? Many of you have been to weekends, and they'll have a after party at one of those weekends, one night. Why not do it at one of your club dances occasionally? This is just variety. And again, I go back to this thing. If I was a guest or member, is this the type of environment that would draw me back? Trying not to be repetitious, I hit on some things that they didn't exactly cover, but yet it was all encompassing. 2 more? All right. Again, if there's anything out there that that maybe what I've said has sparked some ideas or thoughts, please share them, because none of us know all the answers. And I got one more question I want you to think about before I give it back to Bill. I got one of the clubs that I teach for. How to say this without being nasty? We have some angels that come, quote, unquote, to help. A month ago, I had to go back and teach those angels heads and sides. And these people have been dancing at least 3 years. I've actually had some new dancers come up and say, can you split us up so we don't have to dance with them?
I think we've all seen that. One thing I would like to mention, and it's not in my notes, and it's something that I've observed not only where I'm calling but other places. And first off, we know that every class should be a dance. And when we bring new people into the activity, it's important to tell them, hey, everybody is a square dancer once you take hands and circle left. And that, in fact, that was one of the questions I posed in an editorial many years ago. What's the first call on the A2 list? Circle left. We tend to forget we have to start there and work up. Some dancers just know more calls than others. What I've found is that prior to my dance, and it used to be that every dance we went to, the third tip of the night was a workshop tip. Well, nobody wants to do that anymore. They seem to want to dance all the way through. So what I've started doing is my first part of the evening is I workshop my dancers to teach them something different that they already know. Last week I was working teacup chain, with the men being on the right-hand side, which is not a beer mug chain. That's different. That's left-handed. And letting the men do it. And then I put them in facing lines and let them do teacup chain from facing lines. This club had never done things like that before. Number one, they were trying to learn how to dance properly. And the people who did not want to learn dance by definition, and I was flat told when I started calling for this club, I don't want any of that DVD crap. That was a direct phrase. Now all of a sudden are excited because we've added some spice to the regular square dancing that they can do, even though during the dance I am not going to call teacup chain from facing lines. But the workshop in advance, or the fact that you can put them in ocean waves with the girls on the end and say, zoom, girls, zoom. Wow, I didn't know I could do that. I can get away with calling that in a dance now without even worrying about it. And what we have done is we've taken our regular choreography and made it interesting for the dancers. And the dancers like that. And that's one of the reasons dancers will keep coming back. As the gentleman in the back says, I'm a loner. I don't want to associate with people. But guess what? I've now made it something interesting that he can dance, enjoy, and be separate from everybody else and at the same time participate. You can dance and have a good time. You don't have to go to higher level programs to do it. We can take that. And that's our job as a callers, to make our responsibility to that, to keep our dances interesting.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think one thing I'm seeing is commitment. People don't want to commit to things anymore. When you start talking about club leadership and so forth, there's a certain resistance by some people because they don't want to become a club officer or be a club leader. They just want to come have fun. And when people start saying, well, we'd like you to run for office or we want you to do this or that, they start backing away from the activity. And I've seen so many officers in the past where they've worked 2, 3 years, 4 years, and that's it, I'm done. And as soon as they're done with their office, they're out the door. And I've seen more and more dancers not wanting to take any leadership role. I'm not sure how many new clubs are out there. I know there's not many. Most of them are older clubs. And when the older clubs get to the point, they kind of say, we're done, we fold the doors. Newer clubs I've seen, though, have done real well, whether it be a dancer club, officer run, or caller run. And a case example, I started a new club in Kansas City last summer. It was an old club. They had one square coming, 1 or 2 squares, and they lost the caller. The caller moved, whatever. Anyway, they asked me to come down and call for them. Lo and behold, we were running 1 or 2 squares, and this is for practical reason, there was no officers. It was kind of, I walked in the door and took over. And after about 3 or 4 months, I said, you know what, let's let's just close it down, and we're going to reformat a new club, call it a completely different new name. We did it. Didn't change anything. We just reformatted it and became a new club. I run the club. It's Call or Run now, and it's announced that way. It's Call or Run. We've been running 7 squares. All of a sudden, we went from 1 or 2 squares, and we're up to 7. And I don't know what the reason is, but we're a brand new club. That's the only thing I'm hanging our hat on. And people are having a blast when they come to our dances. Donna and I do most all the work. I mean, Donna pretty much does all the work as far as making coffee and tea and so forth, and taking the money to the door. I set up sound and go to the calling. And it's pretty much back-to-back tips, very little break in between, and we go back and do it again. So I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like by the fact we created a brand new club, all of a sudden there's new energy. And maybe that's what we have to consider. I know in our area, when I was looking at our roster of clubs, most of the clubs started in the 70s and 80s. Hardly anyone in 90 and even less in 2000. So maybe that's where we went wrong. Maybe we started not encouraging people to start clubs. We stopped encouraging callers to create clubs. And I think you just have to kind of evaluate where do we go from here. But I think the more and more dancers are less enthused about being leaders. And by the fact they're not wanting to be leaders, they don't want to help with lessons. And they're not really encouraging people to take lessons. And people taking lessons don't want to really commit to taking lessons because, like I said, they want immediate gratifications.
All right. Do we have any more thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas? We're in the entertainment business. We've got to get people coming to our dances. We have to entertain them. We as callers, and we have maybe some partners out there, but we as callers, we have to do our homework. I used to use a saying, it don't work, apply anymore. You can't take your record case in and set it down at the door when you go home and pick it up when you go back out. Now it's your computer case, but nevertheless, it's the same principle. We have to do our homework. And back to what Dana was talking, I've seen a couple of clubs that instead of officers have gone to a board, and they rotate responsibilities. I've seen a couple of clubs that they will have a treasurer just for continuity reasons, but they share working the door. That way that treasurer couple is not bound to be at that door every week or every dance, however it may be. And they'll take turns doing announcements and etc. But I think, get you in a minute, Dave, but I think part of it is we need to sit back and take a look. As Bill said, are we a part of the problem or are we as part of the solution?
Our club in Cheyenne has been run by myself and my wife for about 40 years. What happened was we had a club that was run by officers, and you know how one year you have a very strong president and your club builds, and then you have the next year an officer or officers that kind of like a roller coaster, and it has that dip, and then it barely makes a little bit of a gain again, and then pretty soon it's like this. And it got to the point that the manager of the club at that time, or the president of the club, said, why don't you just take it over? Why don't you just take it over as far as a club caller? And so we did, and we've been running that way ever since. One of the things that I've noticed in this entire process as far as this retention is that this is not a new program or a new problem. This is a problem that has been going on, and I read it in, believe it, in Sets in Order in 1950. And in 1950, one of the headlines inside the book, they were talking about retention. And they were losing 50% of the dancers at that time right after the lessons as far as it's concerned. And then we went into an era of time that square dancing was not building whatsoever. We were on that really slope. We were on a dive. And now it's starting to come back a little bit. And so any ideas that we can, as far as retention is concerned, is great. And with your parties and with your with your outside activities as far as the square dancing activities itself. And it doesn't have to be, and continue to be or have a square dance at the time. It's all building as far as camaraderie and that sort of thing. If you were running a color run club, then you're the true leader at that club. But really, when you have an officer run club, the color is still the one who is the leader. He may be what kind of a terminology can I use? An advisor or a leader that is passive. You become a passive leader, and those are the ones that the dancers, new dancers or new people that come into you, is that they come to you and you look at the caller as their leader. They may not know the president of the group. It's the caller who is their leader. And then when after they are promoted into the club, then they find out the responsibilities sometimes of the club. So the callers are very, very important. You have to set the tone. You're the one that has to set the situation so that you retain them. Yes, the club certainly has to help, but it's the caller's responsibility to make certain that's done.
Thank you, Dave. As our theme says, that's entertainment. Guys, gals, ladies, gentlemen, we are out there to provide entertainment. It can be from the simplest little thing of greeting them when they come into the door, or I don't know what the top thing might be. Going and picking them up and taking them to paying their way to the ball game. I don't know. But nevertheless, we're in the entertainment business. We got to work on our sociability. We as callers got to work on our choreography. We as leaders need to do our best to inspire and encourage everybody. And. We appreciate your coming. If there's no thoughts, other questions, thoughts, concerns, how about a nice hand for Bill Boyd, Dana Schirmer, and most of all, thank you, because as I tell my dancers, I can't have fun without you. And we couldn't have done this without all of you people out there, and thanks again.